Will you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Moore. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Muhammad. Chairman Conway.
Present.
5 present. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Every year when we do the city budget, we have a public hearing in one of the neighborhoods, and I'd ask the members, and Alderwoman Carol Howard, who's sitting here to the left of me, she volunteered to undertake this effort to find the hall, get all of the accommodations, and we owe her a debt of gratitude. It's a great facility. It's accessible. It's off of Kings Highway, and I appreciate that. She's one of the committee members also, which is very helpful to us in what we consider a tough budget year. And I'm going to ask Alderwoman Howard to welcome you to the 14th Ward.
Thank you, Alderman Conway. I just want to welcome everyone and let you know that we're here to talk about the appropriations for the fiscal year 17-18. And if you did not sign up to speak back there at the table, please sign up. You'll be allocated about 3 minutes with questions and whatever you wish to add. We appreciate you coming out, taking the time, and taking the concern to see how your tax dollars are being spent. Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Conway.
Thank you so much for hosting us tonight. Also, I did see in the room one of my former colleagues, State Representative Donna Behringer. She's one of the rookies up in Jeff City. Everyone give her a hand, and then we can move on. Unfortunately, all of the years that I've had the luxury of chairing this committee, our budget has always been tight and tighter. And with us tonight will be Mr. Paul Payne, who is our budget director. And he'll walk you through the process. We will take about 10 to 14 minutes to go through so you can see the big picture and some of the modifications that we're starting this budget process with. The Board of E&A, which is the mayor, the president of the Board of Aldermen, and the comptroller, made the first pass at this budget, and they've sent it to us. And then we have the ability to cut things, and we have the ability to suggest increases in certain departments. Again, it's a tight year. We're also going to talk about, I know within our neighborhoods, we have a refuse problem right now, and your trash is getting picked up slower. And we're going to address a little bit of that tonight and how that's going to work into the budget. Mr. Payne, are you ready to give us an overview? And while he's doing that, to give you a little more background, I have Alderwoman Marlene Davis from the 19th Ward. She represents a lot of the areas around St. Louis University, Tiffany neighborhood. She's been at the Board of Aldermen for many years. She's also been on the school board. So she has a storied career and does understand the big picture. And next to her is Alderwoman Beth Murphy. She's from the 13th Ward. I would just say somewhere down there on South Grand, south of St. Mary's. That's the best I can do it. Alderwoman Carol Howard, she's got one of the proudest accomplishments right now going in the city of St. Louis. Bevo Mill is open again, and that is in her ward, and she just came up. Obviously, the neighbors like it. She has also worked with the business community on Gravois to get a community improvement district where they can increase their appealability to the rest of the city. Alderman Joe Vaccaro from the 23rd Ward. He butts up to St. Louis Hill, the edge of the city, and we're probably 300 yards away from his ward. I'm close. And Mr. Paul Payne is up and going. If you want to use a microphone, you can grab that one, or you can grab mine. But you have to be fast to get mine.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Ways and Means Committee, and members here, members of the public tonight. What I was going to present to you is a presentation I made at the Ways and Means Committee when we presented the budget on May 10th. This is just sort of a highlight of the budget as presented to this board. I should also point out we do have a few hard copies, but all of this material I'm going to be talking about tonight is also online on the city's website. If you go to the city's budget division, you can find all of this there, as well as the budget documents for more details. So this is all accessible. On our first slide, this is a highlight of the total budget for the city of St. Louis for FY18 as proposed. The total budget amounts to $1,051,000,000. And while that sounds like an awful lot of money, not all of that is discretionary funds. You'll note that the general fund, which is funds most of our everyday services, amounts to $510.5 million, just a little under half of the budget. There are also some special revenue funds of about $133.6 million. When you hear about special taxes and things which fund different services and all, those are the special revenue funds. Grant funds, $54.2 million. Those are funds that we get through the state or from the federal government and are restricted to their purpose. The debt service fund, that actually is up this year, $5.8 million. That's the amount of money that we pay for general obligation debt. That's that property tax-based general fund, general obligation debt. If you remember last April, a year ago, we had a $25 million bond issue on the ballot, and that to buy fire trucks and such, and that is why that amount is going up this year. Capital improvement funds, we have a number of sources allocated to capital improvements, the biggest being the half-cent sales tax, as well as some other sources of revenue, some parks taxes and such. That's $39.9 million. It's actually down this coming year, simply because the sales tax has been lagging from the prior year. Enterprise funds, that's a rather large amount of $226.4 million. Those are the airport and water divisions. Enterprise in that they operate as a separate business, so they're sort of independent of the rest of the budget, but they're part of the budget. And then internal service funds, that's more of a technical category. Departments charging each other, that's where also the health benefits are located in the budget, $81 million total. Just sort of a highlight of how we've been doing this year. Earnings tax is up to date. Actually, the earnings tax is doing pretty well. It was up 4.9, a little less in April, about 4.6, but it's one of the few that's actually been doing well. Our payroll tax went up a little bit in April, but it had been through the third quarter of this year, had been flat, sort of not growing. It's a slightly different base than the earnings tax itself. Payroll tax, nonprofits and things like and government agencies do not pay the payroll tax, so it's got a different base. As I mentioned, the sales tax was down 1.6% through the third quarter. These three revenues alone represent about half of our general fund budget. And I'm not going to go too much detail here, but you hear a lot about, what's our budget gap? In the middle of the year, this year, I was looking at about a $20 million budget gap, projecting forward about how much we're going to have to cover in the next fiscal year, meaning the projected revenues growth, let's say 1.5% or so, against all our expenses, including known increases, would produce a gap. Now, when we got down to it, it ended up around $17 million, which is what we ended up having to, that was basically our task. How do you bridge that gap between our projected revenues and our projected budget? And so the rest of this presentation discusses a lot of that. It's a combination of budget cuts, and you're going to see a number of budget cuts, and as the board is hearing from departments, a number of position cuts as well, about $7.3 million. We also have some revenue reallocations. What is that? That's basically saying, rather than cut this service, we are going to allocate these revenues that are particularly for this service to offset some of the budget gap. Particular note is the capital funds and some of the use tax monies. And then new and special fund revenues. Some of these were increases after the budget was proposed. For instance, increased EMS fees, as well as some online sales taxes. You've heard Amazon is beginning to charge sales taxes now. Well, that actually helps us, given that we weren't collecting that before. So that's a positive thing. That's $3.3 million. So we sort of cobbled together that solution in order to make the budget balance. I always discuss payroll costs because payroll costs represent about 75% of our budget. So anything that happens with payroll is going to drive what are some of our budget trends. With the police department, it's the largest department in the city government. It's about $5.8 million increase, but that's only for pay matrix increases. They have a pay matrix where each year they go up a certain fraction. It does not include a market increase in the number of officers. One of the biggest part of that increase is pensions, which has been a big cost for us over recent years. About $3.1 million of that increase. In the fire department, similarly to police, they have that same pay matrix, and it goes up in total $1.5 million. That includes the cost of the pay matrix, as well as also they did have a smaller increase in their pensions of about $600,000. And for the rest, non-uniform costs, $2.3 million. We have a merit pay increase structure where it's on your anniversary date of hire. That's about 1.5%. And then our employee retirement costs actually went down this year, about a little under $500,000. And again, I'm not going to hit all this detail, but in order to bridge the budget gap, what we basically looked at every department and tried to cut out things that we could. So you're going to see a lot of position reductions. Some of the big items, for instance, we're deferring capital equipment purchases. That was the big item in the citywide capital or citywide accounts. And this was the detail for the $7.3 million in budget cuts. You can see they're scattered across most of those departments. And here's some detail for the new and special fund revenues. As I mentioned, EMS fees for about $1 million. The excess use tax, this is just that one portion of related to the online sales that I mentioned. And so that was basically, we're going to have to be watching it over the next year to see what kind of impact that has, because it's very early in the process of getting those revenues. And the economic development infrastructure, if you remember, part of those, that's the new sales tax that went into effect. Just for as a primer for that, the new sales tax won't go into effect until October of this year. So the one we just voted on in April goes into effect in October. It takes about a two-month lag between when they start collecting it and when we start getting receipts. So from the new sales tax, we should see about 7 months of receipts. And now by ordinance, 10% of that was allocated towards capital purposes, and that's what this amount is. That's just the 10%. The rest of it is still in the budget to be allocated according to the purposes allocated by that ordinance, which is 60% of that was transit. In the fund reallocations, as I mentioned, the half-cent capital sales tax, that's about $2.75 million. The biggest chunk of that is going to be the ward accounts, which has been being nicked for $2.25 million, and then the recreation allocation of $500,000. Now, in going through the budget process through the Board of E&A, I believe they've identified some funds that would from block grant that would make up for the recreation funding capital. So we believe we're covered on that. Lead fund, the 60% of that's COI fees. That's the certificate of inspection fees. A number of years ago, that fee was increased, and 60%, which used to all go to general revenue, was going to the lead fund, which was in deficit at the time. Now they have a surplus, rather significant surplus. So those funds are going to be moved over to the general revenue. And then the local use tax. Affordable housing, which has not gotten, in previous years, it's gotten $4.5 million out of its total $5 million, which was the original allocation. We did get that up a little bit. There's $315,000 still being reallocated, as well as the $2 million from building demolition. This is sort of where, if you ever think of those pies, where's the money come from and where does it go? This is where the money comes from. General fund revenues totaling to $510.5 million. The biggest source of revenue being the earnings tax is estimated at $179.1 million. It's about a 2.7% increase. As I mentioned, the earnings tax has done fairly respectable in the last year or two. It's sort of been outperforming what we've estimated, but it's one of the few that actually has. The The property tax was up about is at $60 million. It's only about 12% of our revenue. And I think people should understand that the city of St. Louis, of your total property tax bill, the city of St. Louis gets just a little over about 20% of that. If you ever look at those pie charts where they give you the bill, you'll see that the city's share is about 20%. The biggest share goes to the school board, and then of course you have the Zoo Museum District and those other entities that receive property taxes. The sales tax at $53.6 million, that's actually just increasing about a 1% increase over this current fiscal year. As I mentioned, it has been down through this current fiscal year, so it's been one that we had a few good years going back 2 or 3 years, and then these last 2 have been bad. Now, we were expecting somewhat of a dip because we didn't have things like the NFL football season, which should have a small impact on that. What we're estimating for next year is a return to a slight growth, a little less than trend. The payroll tax, as I mentioned, $38.2 million. It's estimated at 1.5% increase. Again, because it's a different base and it's been growing at a slower rate, we got that a little slower, less than the earnings tax. Franchise utility taxes, that's been a trouble area on our revenue side. A couple of reasons. One, when we have obviously the moderate weather and such, everyone's utility bills go down, which is great, but it means less tax revenue. And also, in particular, with the franchise utility taxes, telecom tax revenue is significantly down. And why is that? You say, well, most people, 1, they're getting rid of their landline, or 2, the cost of using your cell phone, you're shopping around, and it's a competitive market, and those costs are going down. We've seen a decline of 5% this year, 16% in the last 2 years. That hits our revenue base. So that's one of the areas where we've been seeing declines on our revenue base, and we had to make up for it. Intergovernmental revenues, those are the kind of revenues that we receive from the state for, let's say, Medicare, Medicaid payments, EMS type of things. It's been about flat. We have seen EMS, as I mentioned, go up a bit in the last year. License receipts, mostly the graduated business license that's collected by the license collector, that's the biggest chunk of those sources of revenues. But they're all fixed rates, and so they're pretty much flat. Departmental fees and fines, those $53 million, that's where you're going to see a bigger increase. That's primarily some of the ones, the bigger fees you're going to get from building division, those kind of fees, as well as the refuse fees is in that category. Also on city courts, although city courts has been down over the last few years. And then the other category, that big negative 22.7%, it's a little bit of an anomaly. We had something called the 27th pay this year. 27th pay is when you are paid on a bi-weekly basis. Every 11 years, you get 27 paychecks. It just happens that way, and it's just a quirk of the calendar. And it skews your budget because this year we had a budget 27, next year is going to be 26. We planned for that, but it just, when you compare the numbers, it skews the numbers, and we set aside monies for that purpose. And again, now on where does the money go? By department, here it is, starting with general government. That includes mayor's office and board of aldermen, all the administrative type departments. That's $24 million, it's down 1.5. You're going to see a lot of negative numbers on this. Finance department, that's the comptroller's office and related departments. Non-departmental, 4.2%. That's an increase. That's $40.2 million. That's where we carry a lot of our debt service payments and such, so it's not related to any one particular department. But we do have an increase in our costs on debt. Parks and Recreation and Forestry, $21 million. We see county offices, that $8.4 million. The reason why you see a decline of 15%, the Board of Elections, because this year was an election year, obviously, and so we had 4 scheduled elections. Now, next year we won't. So you'll see that every other year it goes up and down. Now, we might have some special elections, but that's primarily the reason why. And you can see the other categories. The biggest, obviously, public safety, $289.9 million, and that one's actually up 1%. And you can see public safety in the pie chart is 57% of the budget. These are some of the special funds in addition to general revenues. The biggest thing I wanted to point out, well, one, you have the economic development sales tax. Again, that's that new sales tax that we just approved 7 months of receipts from that. Also, on the local use tax, you've heard of when that stadium proposal went away, so there was a portion of the local use tax that would go up because of the sales tax increasing. Well, that also would be worth 7 months of receipts. Well, that is estimated to be about $2.3 million. And when we took the budget to E&A, the feeling was that, well, let's not allocate that just yet. So while this budget proposes a lot of things, it does not allocate the $2.3 million yet in the increase in the use tax. So that's yet to be allocated. The capital fund, as I mentioned, $39.9 million. And I won't go into this too much detail. We're going to talk a little bit about it, but you can see what the allocations are. One of the challenges we have is that while it's allocated by ordinance, the biggest chunk that we have available for citywide improvements has all been allocated to existing debt service. So we don't have that much in discretionary funds to address some of the equipment needs that we have. I want to tell you, this is the personnel changes by department. You see that we're all continuing to reduce the total number of personnel. Overall, it's down by 53 positions, 37 of which are in the general fund. The chart down below, you can see that obviously the Public Safety Department is the biggest department in city government. And that continues a trend. If you go back 10 years, we've lost over 600 positions in that time period. Pension costs, I won't go into too much detail. It's something that we continue to struggle with. We had some reform efforts in the last few years that got us, particularly with the fire department, got us down a little bit. They're going back up a little bit, but it continues to be an area where we want to address in the future to get our costs in line. That's the status of the pension funding. Again, I'm not going to go into this in detail. If you're interested, this is online and you can look at the detail. I will point out that most of we have 4 systems now, 2 fire and 1 regular employee, 1 police. They're all about 80% or just a little under 80% funded, which isn't a bad funding level. The issue has been just how much it costs to keep us up in that funding level. So that's always going to be that's been a challenge for the last number of years. And that's it. That's just the recap. So I'll leave it up to Mr. Chairman.
And let's see, Paul, I know part of the companion to this budget is 2 bills that we're bringing in. One is an additional monthly fee on your trash bill, and I think some EMS charges. What was the 150,000? I forgot what that small. It was a smaller one. School crossing guards. I think.
Well, there was a proposal to the alarm registration fee, I believe.
Right, an increase in
$150,000, and then of course the revenue from the refuse fee. The refuse fee was imposed back in 2010, and if you remember, it's $11 a month. Right now, that generates about $13.5 million per year. Now, the ordinance, when passed, contemplated we're going to be adjusting that every so often, particularly every fiscal year or whatever is more appropriate. But we haven't done that since. And so one of the struggles that we're having is finding funds to replace our refuse fleet. And I'm sure everyone's got a story now about how difficult or some problem they've had with refuse collections. I was just talking to the chairman before the meeting. I said, yeah, I noticed they just picked mine up on Saturday simply because the dumpster was overflowing. And I'm told it's because some of the trucks just aren't available, and they're having to scurry around to try to get available trucks so that they can run. So some of them are running on Saturdays in order to do that. The primary purpose of the proposed increase in the refuse fee would be to address that very thing, is try to get us some funding for refuse trucks. I should also point out one of the increases in the budget was the fact that our disposal fees are going up as well. There was a $500,000 increase there, so that also crowds out other things. So that's one of the things that I know we're going to be proposing, and that's the reason why.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Since we started, one of my good friends, the second most senior alderman, the Board of Aldermen, Alderman Terry Kennedy from the 18th Ward, is here with us. Thank you, Terry. And I also have the youngest member of the committee, or the newest, Alderwoman Pam Boyd, who was elected just recently from the 27th Ward. I do have former State Senator Harry Kennedy here in the room, too. We will go through everyone that signed up. You can ask a question. If I can answer it, I will answer it. If you have a comment, we will listen. In essence, we're going to give you about 3 minutes apiece. Oh, they're giving me more people that came in. We'll give you about 3 minutes apiece to ask questions or to give us comments. And so we're going to start off with the first name on my list, and that is Lisa Cagle.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for being here and allowing us to speak to you today. So I want to talk to you about the public safety budget, which includes most of the arrest and incarcerate functions of the city and not much else other than the fire department. And it has increased $18.97 million from the fiscal year 2016 budget, and that's an increase of $10 million in police alone. As a budgeted 1,316 uniform officers, and assuming that the city population is 319,000, which is generous, this gives us a police per capita, that's a police per 10,000 residents, rate of 41.3, which makes St. Louis somewhere between the 6th and the 8th most policed city in the US. This is a much higher police per capita rate than Kansas City, which is at 27.4 per capita compared to our 41. Toledo, Ohio, Wichita, and others, which have population sizes similar to St. Louis. It seems that our problem with public safety maybe isn't the number of police officers. So I'm standing here before you today to beg you to think about this budget. Public safety is not just about policing. We need to be spending much more money on preventing the causes of crime in the first place. Imagine if the 57% of our general fund budget that is currently spent on public safety addressed the issues that we know lead to crime: lack of education, lack of opportunity, racial and socioeconomic disparities in wealth, income, resources, and services. With an ever-widening gap between the haves and the have-nots and a shrinking middle class, crime isn't going to go away magically, and policing alone will not solve this problem. So I'm asking you to instead spend more money on community centers, on creating opportunities for residents who our school system is currently failing, on facilities for our youth, on affordable housing and services for low-income families. Our residents shouldn't be fighting each other over services, particularly our most vulnerable residents, as has recently happened at the 12th Park Recreation Center when we closed down one homeless shelter before we had another place to house people. So we've increased our public safety budget by almost $19 million in 2 fiscal years, but until we significantly change the way we do things in our region and who and what and where we invest our money, our city isn't going to be safer for anyone. So please consider this now. For this budget and in the future, we need a more holistic understanding of public safety. The way we're doing things isn't effective, and throwing more money at the way that we're currently doing things instead of changing the model we're using will not make the underlying problems go away. Thank you.
I don't even know what to say. Mr. Eric Wisner.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, and thank you. And I'm addressing them as well. I work for the Refuse Division, and just to give you an anecdote, I spoke to one of our drivers today. Today is the alley driver's day off. We have 4 10-hour days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So today is voluntary only, with exception of the spare drivers and the cart drivers. The driver who collected my trash today, which should have been collected several days ago, had to wait an hour this morning to get a truck as a spare driver on a voluntary day. 40% of our equipment is double its life expectancy. It's 2000 model trucks. Anybody in here drive a 17-year-old car? They get to the point where they get real expensive and don't run when you need them to. I've been in that situation. Half our fleet, well, 40% of our fleet is 2000s. They're 17 years old. We just paid $60,000 to put new engines in 3 of those trucks. We've been putting Band-Aids on broken limbs for years because we're not getting funded, and we cannot do the job. We must have equipment. I would ask, I don't know what the city needs to do to get people there. We can't get competent people either. They raised the starting wage 10.39% for recruiting. We're still not getting people. I don't know if it's possible to eliminate the mandate to live in the city. There's people all around who would love to have these jobs. I mean, it only starts out at $16 an hour, but I know quite a few people who'd like to have it. The competency just isn't here. You can't put a bus driver in a piece of equipment that he has to, operate with that kind of skill. We desperately need to raise these refuse rates. I don't want to do it. I don't want to pay any more than anybody else. But if we don't get trucks, we can't do the job. And God help us if we privatize it, because right now it costs us, what is it, Chairman, $18.5 million is our budget? It's between 38 and 42 million minimum to privatize it, and that's without any bulk collection. That means you only get picked up what you put in that container, and they're going to limit that. They'll stop a lot of what goes on in this city, the services that we provide. That is definitely not what we want. We can't afford that. We certainly don't want it. We're doing the best we can. Please call the mayor's office. Tell them, we need equipment. We need to be supported. These guys can't do it. As an example, they put that $11 a month in. They cannot appropriate it. They put it in, they give it to the city decides what to do with it. Without going to the mayor, you're not going to accomplish anything. Call the mayor, please.
Jerry Conley.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I feel like a broken record here, but I'm going to speak briefly about the city's transparency and particularly the website. I addressed this last year. There might have been modest improvement in a couple of areas, but the ability of the public to receive adequate notices and to find documentation on the website is still extremely limited. There was a public hearing with the Board of E&A a couple of weeks ago. That notice went up the evening before on Nextdoor and wasn't published on the website until the day of the meeting. This evening's meeting had about a week's notice, but aside from city website and belatedly on Nextdoor, I can't remember hearing a radio announcement, anything on TV, and I think if the board, the aldermen, and the mayor and comptroller are serious about engaging the community, we really do need to have a holistic, coherent, well-organized promotional plan to engage the citizens in the process. One of the item is more of a question to the committee or Mr. Payne regarding the certificate of inspection fees that are now getting rolled back rather than being applied to the lead fund. Is there a lack of need where the lead fund's not being expended, or is there a challenge in how that money's being spent?
When we were reviewing this before the budget, can you speak up, please?
Yeah.
I'll say, when we were reviewing this before the budget was proposed, back, I want to say it was FY12. That's when they implemented this change. As I mentioned, they increased the rate, and then they moved 60% of it over to the lead fund. Well, since that point in time, the expenditures over in the lead fund balance has gone up over $4 million. So they're not spending nearly as much as they had anticipated. And I asked the building division about that. One of them was that they were expecting some grant funds to expire, which didn't. And so what basically has gone on is that the general fund went down by at least $500,000 in that year, has been down since, but that fund has been accumulating things. So when proposing, looking at the budget cuts that we made this year, it would say, well, we could return that to the general fund and still not have an appreciable impact on their activities over in that fund. So that's what we did.
Thank you, Paul.
And just one final item, which other people are going to be speaking to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I only learned by attending a meeting at SLDC that the SLDC actually charges rents to some of the other city's agencies, including the Affordable Housing Commission and the Community Development Agency. I don't know if other entities are charged rent, but it seems like we're pulling resources from parts of the city that are doing good work and have limited resources, moving them to SLDC where there's very little transparency and accountability for the average citizen to find out how that money is spent. Thank you.
All right, Kim Franks.
Thank you all for opening up this meeting to the community and allowing me the opportunity to speak, and also thank you all for your service. So I know that getting into the nuts and bolts of a huge budget is, you know, it's very intense, and that you have to spend a lot of time with your heads bent down. And so I just want to just urge you, as you all consider the ways and means of balancing the city budget, to be mindful of the citizens and in the commitment that a lot of us have made to the city, both new residents and long-term residents. So when I think about ways and means of generating revenue, I know it didn't come up here, but I'm really concerned about the impact of tax abatements and TIFs. And I know that we are concerned about bringing business into the city and bringing residents into the cities, but as we look at the budget, I'm really interested to see what is the impact and the lost opportunity cost, and what is the foregone revenue. So I got my tax assessment for 2017. We bought a rehab home. We're very privileged to live in our home, in a beautiful home on a really nice street that's high in demand. We get letters from people wanting to buy our home. When we bought our home, we did not move into a rehab home with the tax abatement. So whenever taxes do increase, our family feels that impact. So right now, our family's trying to scratch our head and figure out how to deal with not having the money that came from my husband's pay raise this past year, and replace this. Somebody asked, do you drive a 17-year-old car? We have a 27-year-old car. So we're trying to figure out how to replace that 27-year-old car, and also take care of a deck that's falling apart on our home. And so it's a little bit frustrating for me to think about the impact. I know for my family, we have a little bit of a cushion. We'll get through this and we'll figure out, but I have a feeling that I'm gonna lose some neighbors as rents go up. I already have a friend that already said that he was gonna be raising his rents because the property taxes on his two-family doubled, and his insurance costs went up. So here's the thing. We have a social contract. I want our children to be educated so that we have citizens that have the competency to stand here at the mic and be civically involved like I'm involved, and like you all are involved. And so I want to make sure that our schools are fully funded, but we've got to be able to keep our residents, and we cannot tax people out of their homes. And I'm concerned that that's what's going to happen if we keep on trying to balance the budget by giving away some quite unnecessary tax abatements. I just don't understand a tax abatement on a $859,000 new construction home in the Hill, and their taxes get rolled back. So I know I'm running short on time, but I just want to think about that. And also, I just have a question for Mr. Payne. Can you tell me a little bit about what's behind there's about
Ms.
two...
Franks, you asked me the question, and I'll see if he'd like to answer it.
Okay, sure, I'll ask you the question. So there's some money that you all decided not to appropriate within in the new sales tax. I think you all decided not to appropriate $2.3 million that hasn't been appropriated yet. What's the logic behind that, and what are you thinking that appropriation is going to go to?
And I think Mr. Payne addressed that the three, the mayor, the comptroller, the president of the board of aldermen, realized that it didn't make a lot of sense, and I'm not in their minds, it didn't make a lot of sense to allocate the money because it doesn't start till October 1st, and I don't think I received the first payment until December. So that's what we'll probably do, is a supplemental budget appropriation sometime in December when we get a little bit better grip of what it's going to be, and it'll give us a little bit of hindsight to look back to see what additional urgent needs are here.
So could that money go towards refuse?
That money can go anywhere that the Board of E&A tells us.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And tell that alderman in that ward not to raise the values of those people's homes, and the taxes won't go up. Okay, Alexandra Johnson. Yes, I'm the alderman there, and I take credit for raising the property values. Alexandra Johnson.
Well, that was a popular answer, Mr. Conway.
Absolutely, I tell it the way it is, Ms. Johnson. You
All
have
right.
3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you also for your time. Looking at these numbers, I know it does take a lot of time to put together. We do rank consistently out of the 100 largest cities, 83rd in terms of coming in consistently with a budget gap. That is correct, Mr. Payne. We do kind of constantly have that budget gap. And one of the comments that you made during your May 10th presentation to the Ways and Means Committee, was that you were a little bit surprised that it was that high, given that this isn't actually a really crunch year overall. We're not in 2008, for example, where I think you mentioned in past years it's actually gone up as high as 30 mil. Can you speak a little bit to that?
You have to.
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's just, it was his comment. You're absolutely right.
A little bit closer to the microphone.
Yeah, and so so he had made the comment to you guys in the Ways and Means Committee that he was surprised because this wasn't a real budget deficit year overall. In the past, the gap has been larger, 30 mil in other years, but it was a little bit surprising to see it go as high as 2017, and I wondered if he could clarify a little bit that comment.
Right, and Paul's been
maybe you
around
could-
actually longer than I have, I think. But
Don't
the 1 year
date
we
your
did have,
colleagues.
we've only had the $32 million bad year once in that period of time. And when he had the pension cost up on this board, when you saw the spike in the pension costs, that contributed fairly greatly, and that was almost 9 or 10 years ago. We had a combination of the economy sinking and the pension costs. Across the board this year, and I know that he presented it fairly well, that some of our revenues fell off and weren't as anticipated. The Cardinals didn't make the playoffs. You know, we had all of these events that weren't generating all of those additional taxes, and I was even myself personally surprised that the sales tax did not give us that growth that we had projected and predicted on. But that's the main reason. If Paul wants to fill in a little bit more, but I think that you had all of those years back to back listed there, and you might even be able to pull that up for me. Let me go.
Did you want to come up to the mic?
I'll just add, that comment, what I was basically alluding to is that it's been a challenge to try to keep the budget balanced. And every year you're going to have, and I've never seen it where I project forward and see it balanced. I mean, there's always just a challenge. But what was particular about this year is that we're not in a recession. So when you see it up in the high teens, you get to be worried. And then looking forward, remember, this is we're in the 8th year of economic expansion, and so eventually there's going to be a recession. So those are the type of things we struggle with the budget, and I know Ways and Means has been through this a number of times, is that you got to keep that in mind in the back of your head, that this is with revenue growth in the budget, and eventually we're going to have a patch where we don't have it, and we have to be prepared for that.
No, I mean, 2009 was the bad year. That was when the pension costs went up $30 million.
I would say both our revenues aren't growing sufficiently. And there are a number of revenues that have fallen, particularly just by, as I mentioned, the telecom revenues, and gaming revenues is another one. It's been in half in the last 10 years. And then also just the matter of fact that our expenses have been outpacing our revenue, particularly with the pensions.
And to dovetail on a couple of comments, Kansas City is actually growing at 3.5 times the rate we are. So I'd be curious to know if they're not spending as much money on public safety as we are, how exactly they're allocating their budget. Maybe we can increase our transparency as well, because we can look Kansas City's numbers up pretty easily. On that, Mr. Payne, I had another question that I will direct to Mr. Conway, but it is about a specific line item for the sister cities. It's $75,000 that I was wondering if it's supposed to be a subsidy for the sister cities, and I actually have been on a board for the sister cities and I'm affiliated with them. I'm not aware of any funding that they get from the city, and it says a subsidy for sister cities. So I'm wondering how we can drill down a little bit more on that transparency to get some more information about some specific line items in the budget.
Well, you can look at them, and I'll
Because it just says $75,000.
I realize that, and I will have Alderman Vaccaro get the detail on that contract payment.
Great. Thank you so much.
And then I will point out that the city of St. Louis is 60 square miles. Kansas City is close to, I think, 400 square miles. That if our city was that big, Chesterfield would be in the city of St. Louis. I'll also take the opportunity to point out that 65% of the residents in the city of St. Louis are on some type of government assistance. Now, our main revenue source is our earnings tax. But the only people that pay the earnings tax are the people that are pulling a wage or a W-2. If you're retired, you're not paying the earnings tax. If you don't have taxable wages, you are not paying the earnings tax. Our challenge is that if we were 400 square miles, Chesterfield would be in the city of St. Louis, and I would be absorbing a lot of revenue off of those individuals' W-2s. We are 60 compact square miles, and our challenge as a city is to figure out how to grow the tax base. And when you look at the numbers that Mr. Payne put up here, the greatest number we get is the earnings tax. I need to bring more earners into the city of St. Louis. That is the strategy that we're working on longer term. We need to generate those revenues. On the real estate tax bills, as Mr. Payne said, that real estate tax bill, the city gets, for general revenue purposes, less than 20% for general revenue. The vast majority of it goes to other places. The sales tax is an integral part of our budget, but the most important thing that we're trying to do longer term, and that's what Paul is doing, and our new mayor has a good understanding, is how to grow our wage base going forward. We have other ideas, pilots. A lot of these taxes, your employer pays a 0.5% tax on the payroll, but St. Louis U and Washington U do not pay us a payroll tax on their employees. And that's a significant amount of money. We provide services that allow those institutions and all the not-for-profits to be here in the city of St. Louis. And we have to spread, because the tax burden on you, if you live here in the city of St. Louis, I believe is too darn high. You know, your sales tax is high, your real estate tax rates are high, but every real estate tax rate that's on there, you voted, or voters, or the majority of the voters, have voted for in the past. But we cannot continue to tax the existing population base. Our goal is to bring new people into the city so that we can expand that tax base. That's the strategy we're looking at. I know that it seems tough with these numbers, but if I can't grow that income, I can't grow my services. Mr. Gary Newcomer. Oh, guarantee, you know, I'll fight any battle. I don't care how big and mean they are, but I think we have to have some participation in that level. Gary Newcomer.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of the Community Builders Network of Metro St. Louis. We're a coalition of neighborhood-based organizations and organizations working across sectors to improve our neighborhoods. So tonight, I'm here to talk about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We've mentioned it a few times already. As all of you know, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund awards grants and loans to provide affordable housing, homelessness services, home repair, and a lot of other great programs. So why this program is very important is because at the federal level and the state level, a lot of these gap financing dollars are shrinking pretty fast, especially CDBG and home funds. When accounting for inflation in the last 10 years, there's only half as much of those dollars running around. So these are very important funds. And unfortunately, for the last 5 or 6 years, it's been underfunded beneath the $5 million minimally required rate. So we're very happy to see that it's at $5 million this year. There are some new funds coming online, and those are the use tax dollars from Prop 1. So CBN has been convening some tables with homeless service providers, nonprofit providers providing affordable housing, doing community development work. Sure, I'll try to speak up too. Around these tables, we wanted to provide the recommendation that half of those new use tax dollars go toward the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that's actually when the use tax was originally implemented, half the dollars were supposed to be allocated toward the affordable use tax anyway. So we're hoping to see some of those new dollars go toward the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to provide new quality homes to low-income and homeless residents, and also to help provide programs like home repair, which help keep low-income seniors in their homes. So we're very happy that it's at $5 million. As the alderman, I hope that you will keep it that way, and then also recommend half of those new use tax dollars to go to support the fund as well. So that's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oliver Moss?
Yes.
Okay, good Howard.
I've never had somebody have problems with moss.
That looks like an E. I didn't say Oliver Moss. I'm like, or D.
Well, I want to thank you for having this forum. I want to thank you for being here and representing us. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to get to the point. I'm here about the housing assessment, and my house assessment has gone up over 30%. We all. Are you? You couldn't hear me? Really? Wow. I could do a Frank Sinatra. And so our problem is we are all related. Let me just give you a little background, and I'll keep it within my 3 minutes. I was an Air Force officer. I was a diplomat in the State Department. Then I was a company manager for an oil company in Africa for 10 years. And you are the aldermen representing us. You are parents and grandparents and teachers and workers and leaders. And what we all have in common is that the most significant asset that we have, and the asset that we have are the responsibilities of the people that are under us. In the Air Force, it was our airmen. In the State Department, it was the people within the State Department, but was also the U.S. citizens that we took care of. And then as the country manager, it was the people that were working for me, including the people in Equatorial Guinea and the Africans that were working for me. Those people I worried about. And the thing is, we all worry about the same things. As an officer, I worried about their it wasn't just command. It was worrying about their families. It was worrying about their education. It was worrying about their housing. It was worrying about their food. It was worrying about their clothing. We worried about all of those. I think we have that in common. I think the parents and the teachers have the same thing in common. So what I was always concerned with, how do I best take care of those people? And one of the things that I always came up with was, I got to watch for red flags. Because red flags are the things that are going to pop up and have the biggest impact on them, and I have to try and limit those. My problem, and I think is your red flag, is an assessment that's going up over 30%. I realize where this money goes, and I thank you for the briefing. And I've been given a copy of the briefing, and I'm going to go into a little more detail, but really appreciate the work on that. But see, it's not just the assessment. I think we are probably all in it. I give money, and I can pull my wallet out and show you, to the Botanical Garden, to the History Museum, to the zoo, and to the Natural History Museum. Cover them all, and it's not the minimum that we give. We think that those serve everybody, and we want to contribute to that. But when my assessment goes up over 30%, that has to have an impact on me. And that means it will probably be in these other areas that I'm giving. So just making it short, we've all taken care of people, and we are your assets. I love being in St. Louis. I was born in Deaconess. I've served most of my life overseas, but I came back to St. Louis. And I love St. Louis. And you know, I have to defend St. Louis to St. Louisans. That is just about, go to London, live in Paris, live in Rome, live in Singapore, live in Seoul. Yes, time?
I would
Okay,
like to actually
so-
answer that.
And then what's my fix? My fix, if it have to go up 30%, 30% over 5 years, because you know, to give a problem and not give a solution is sort of ludicrous in my mind. But that's what I'm asking. Represent us and try and help with these things that are ridiculous with 30%. Thank you.
I'd like to actually answer that because it's a question that's come up. So 2 years ago, we voted 75 cents per $100 for the school tax. We also voted 3 cents on the sewer tax, and then we did the senior tax. On this, the city has to stay income neutral. So when property values go down, they can collect more. When property values go up, they have to collect less. They can only go, because of the Hancock Amendment, 2%
Yes.
difference.
Yes.
So 62% of what you're paying is going to what we all voted for, and that was for the teachers' increase and the school. So the city hasn't, for all those who think that the city is just making out like a bandit on this, we're actually income neutral. Now, there still is the opportunity. The school board is the only one that did not roll back. In fact, they actually increased by 2 cents. It's my understanding we have up until September maybe to talk to the school board and get them to come down. But the assessment or the big increase is because of the taxes that we all voted for. I know I voted for the teachers' increase and all that, but we voted for that.
Well, I know
No, and I'll address it clear for the alderman. The assessment is different than the tax rate.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and what the state law provides is every 2 years, you have to reassess the property in your county. The city of St. Louis is a county and a municipality. And so when they reassess, we're not allowed to really make any more money off of that. We just equalize everything. And those people whose homes have gone up in value faster than the others, just the way the law is written, you will have to pay more. And so my suggestion is fire your alderman. Now, if your assessment that we say what your house is worth is more than what you think it's worth, you can appeal it. You
That's
have
right.
a process.
That's right. Which we'll do.
And that's what you should do, and that process is there to assure everybody that they aren't paying too much. Now, usually if you're paying too little, you're not going to complain. So that's the process. It's set by state law. The city of St. Louis, we don't make any extra money out of it. That is the assessor's job. In neighborhoods like the Shaw neighborhood in the 8th Ward, you know, there's a lot of people complain about tax abatement, but what we've been able to do is increase the property values 250%, which in my neighborhoods in the 8th Ward, we pay a lot more taxes to the city of St. Louis today than anybody else did in the past 14 years because of that growth.
And to a certain extent, Steve, we have the ability to do that. And I'm not trying to shirk our responsibility to do that. I'm just saying, over 30%, can we draw that out? And my first thing would be is, let's have a new assessment. So if you want to do 10% in 2 years, and 20% over 4, and 30 over 6, I can handle that.
And I'm not in charge of the assessment. We have an assessor, and part of the problem is we probably didn't have you assessed high enough 2 years ago. So, you know, I mean, I'm just being a realist. I just tell you the truth.
I know that, but I think we all know too, if we go too far with the assessment, as Ms. Franks was saying, people look at it and is this somewhere where I want to come? and it's where I wanted to come when I got off the bus on Tower Grove when I was 10 years old and looked down Florida.
Yeah, and there's some areas in the city where their properties have decreased in value. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Anna Ginsberg. And then we'll have one more speaker after her. Anna, how are you? I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. This will work too. Good evening. Alderman Conway, committee members, Alderman Kennedy, and Pam Boyd, my friend, congratulations. We do this every year. I'm here to talk about our young people. About our young people. For those of you who don't know me, I ran the Neighborhood Stabilization Program for 10 years, and I administered programs for the city that were funded by the Justice Department. I'm here tonight representing two organizations, Advocates for Youth, which was founded by Jamala Rogers, and American Friends Service Committee, which works with young people on addressing institutional racism. I give this testimony every year. We need to provide better support for our young people. The homicide rates are going up. And we also continue to provide these TIFs that do not get paid back. So our budget keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. I want to see us not give away TIFs to people who don't need them. I want to see us not give away TIFs to projects that are going to fail. What I want to see done with the money, and what I want money found for, is to fund programs that we know can help our young people stay out of the criminal justice system. We know what they are. The Justice Department has studied this. After-school programs, mentoring programs, helping kids with their homework, job training, and job placement. Those are the things that will keep our young people out of trouble and turn them into productive citizens. We just don't have the political will to do it. It's easy, it's not hard, it's not rocket science, but we could do it. And another thing that I recently learned is that housing sales in St. Louis increased last year by 33%. There was a study by the Redfin Annual Tracker Survey that called us one of the hottest housing markets in the country. So it doesn't make sense to me that we are continuing to give away these TIFs. And I just want to end up by close by saying, I think for all of us, the lessons of Ferguson are very real. And please pay attention to that as you make your choices. If you had stopped reducing TIFs when I first came here, we would have way more revenue and we would have money to fund these programs and other programs that have been talked about tonight.
My good friend, Alderwoman Davis, come on. I don't have enough court. You come on down and sit in my chair. And then we will get to our last speaker, Michelle.
I can't agree more with Anna's reflection about youth. If we don't get a little bit more serious now, where we'll be in 10 years will be something that we can't deal with. But I do want to share with you that there is a lot of promise. And there's so many programs that most people don't know about. A lot of it was started with the administrations that you worked under, Anna, and some that we're going back to that we know work. Like we need to go back to neighborhood accountability boards. They don't cost us money, but they bring communities together. It brings responsibility and reflection into the neighborhood, and it has a watchful eye over the young people. So that's something that we're looking at as well. We're also looking at the opportunity for us to do the community policing like we used to do when we started it before, because it can be done and it doesn't cost us any money. So those are the things that we need to get serious about. This budget is not going to change. Understand that. We are not an entrepreneurial revenue generating city. So we're not like Tampa, Florida, Orlando, Florida, any of those kind of places, Universal Studios and LA. We're not like that. So until we get to that point where we have more revenue coming in, the only thing we can do is balance it the best we can. And we can start doing things that are more realistic. There's nothing cute about saying our zoo is free. There's nothing cute about that anymore. Most especially to the millions of people that come here to use it. Now, if we want to be free to the citizens of this city, that's fine. They do that in Florida. You show your ID, you go in Busch Gardens for free. If you're from out of town, you're going to pay that $100 and some. That's how it goes. So let's do those kinds of things that are very simple. But I don't want us to lose heart. And I think the last TIF that we had that was in trouble was in 2009, Paul, if I'm not mistaken. And I know whose project that was. And he went out of business. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah. And so our TIFs are paid back. There's a watchful eye on that. We get a review every year in the HUD's committee. So TIFs are paid back. It's like a credit card. So we're not giving away anything. Because remember, think about this. If we gave away $10 million or $2 million to every project that came to the city with other investment dollars with it, we would have to turn the lights out and get transportation for people to leave the city of St. Louis, because we don't have that kind of money. So it has to be paid back. That's the only way we can function.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Michelle, Michelle. How are you today?
Hi.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you for giving me your undivided attention. I appreciate that. Okay. There is a need for the community and our government leaders to understand the role of the health department and the resources necessary to improve the health of our citizens. Public health services work to prevent the spread of disease and epidemics, protect against environmental hazards, prevent injuries, including violence-related injuries, educate the community and encourage healthy behaviors, assist communities in recovering from conditions that negatively impact public health, and assure quality and accessible health care services to our citizens. When you hear this list of responsibilities, you need to understand that the health department plays an important role in maintaining a healthy and safe community. You also have to wonder, how much are we investing in public health? In 2001, after drastic increases in public health funding, the city voted to create a use tax. 50% of the proceeds from the use tax were to go to public health services. The other 50% were to go to affordable housing. In 2002, we were told that there was excess funding being brought in by this use tax, and they wanted us to vote to approve the use tax so that it could be spent in other ways. At that time, we did not understand what that meant when we were voting. So what happened, and I got charts here to show you, but in 2003, all the funding of public health that was being on general revenue funds was cut. That was $7.6 million cut off of general revenue. And that fund then was, the health department was to be funded out of the use tax completely. Voters were not told that the general funds were going to be eliminated. We all thought we were voting to increase public health funding. So then in this year's budget, we are again requesting a 15% reduction in the health department. Now, what that equates to, since we started getting, right before when we were proposing the use tax, and since that time, health department funding has been cut 51%. And since the tax went in place, it has been 27%. So, you want to know where your money is going? I have it here. So, the use tax took place, as you can see, health department funding is gone by 2005. The use tax took place in 2002, was voted again, and so we started getting the revenue then about 2003. During that time, that funding then got moved, and this line here shows that the health department's budget decreased from 12 million to now 5.8 million. At the same time, you can see that police funding has increased on the use tax up to 7.6 million. And then there's all these other departments. Now, yes, there are some that are supposed to be getting money, but all these other departments are getting money off our use tax. And even the health department, I mean, public health services, the animal control is under the health department. That's not really a public health service. So, you know, and we also have the use, or the, what is it, the health department, or what is it, it's to offset, there's a fund also for $5 million that goes towards helping those that don't qualify for Medicaid. So that also falls under the health department. I took these figures for what is really public health services that are being done. And this is what it looks like in staffing. So in 2002, we had almost 300, about 200, I think it was 200 and, almost 300, as you can see, 278 staff. In 2018, they're wanting to cut it down to 114. They're wanting to cut 14 positions this year alone. So I just want to know, why did I go out, get my family, friends, neighbors, knock on doors to get the use tax passed, and for health, public health services? And why is this being done with, why?
All right, thank you. I want to thank all of my colleagues for coming out this evening. Obviously, there's a lot of people with different ways that want to spend the money. The one thing I didn't hear this evening was any way to generate more money. So I have all kinds of people with problems, but I got no solutions to the problems. And so what we'll embark on is continue to expand our tax base, not raise your taxes. And so we look forward to getting something a little bit more organized in a way of long-term planning strategy for the city to generate wages and more people that will be on the tax rolls across the board at every level. I would thank you for coming out tonight. Meeting adjourned.